Hi everyone, my name is Hannah with SoloSettle, and today I'm going to be talking about 3 steps that you can take to settle your debt once and for all. Did you know that on average, debt collectors purchase old debt accounts from banks and credit card companies for just 4% of the original debt amount? Yeah, this means that if you owe a $1,000 debt and it gets sold to a collection agency, then they're probably only going to pay about $40 to transfer ownership of the debt over to them. Then they're going to come after you and try to get you to pay off the debt in full. And if you do, they make a huge profit. Well, luckily there are ways that you can outsmart debt buyers and debt collectors, and one of the best ways to do so is settling your debt before you go to court. Well, what does it mean to settle a debt? Settling a debt is offering a percentage of your debt amount to clear your name of the debt for good. When you get sued for a debt, it's not a good idea to ignore the case. In fact, that's only going to make matters worse. Maybe you know that you owe the debt, and maybe you know that you have enough money to pay off a portion of it or even all of it right now. If that's the case for you, consider reaching out to the opposing attorney to discuss a debt settlement offer. In this video, we'll go over 3 steps that you can take to settle your debt for good. So if you're ready to resolve your debt, SoloSettle can help you with all the 3 steps that we're going to discuss in this video today. SoloSettle is a tech-based approach to debt settlement. Our software sends and receives settlement offers so that you don't have to deal with debt collectors directly at all. Then we manage your debt settlement agreement documentation and send over your payment so that you can keep your financial information private. We'll talk a little bit more about SoloSettle later in this video, but for now, let's jump into the 3 steps you can follow to settle your debt. Step number 1, respond to the lawsuit with a written answer. When you get sued for a debt, you should receive 2 documents in the mail known as the summons and complaint. In some states, the complaint is also called a petition or a warrant in debt. The summons notifies you of the lawsuit against you, while the complaint usually lists out all the specific claims that are being made against you. And it's your responsibility to respond to each of these claims. If you do not respond before your state's deadline, keep in mind, each state has a unique deadline, then the court will interpret it as you admitting to all of the claims against you, and they will likely order a default judgment against you. With a default judgment, debt collectors and creditors can garnish your wages, seize your property, and even freeze your bank account. So this is something you definitely want to avoid, even if you plan to settle the debt. Make sure that you respond to the case in court and send a copy of your answer to the opposing attorney. In your answer, as I said before, you need to respond to each of the claims against you and assert your affirmative defenses. Your affirmative defenses are any legal reasons that you shouldn't be held liable for the case. The reason it's important to respond, even if you plan to settle, is because you may end up reaching a settlement agreement. The debt collector may verbally agree to accept less than the original amount of debt. But some debt collectors are actually known to sneakily file a request for default judgment when they know that you haven't responded, even if they've already agreed to a settlement. At SoloSettle, we can help you draft and file an answer to a debt lawsuit in minutes. All you have to do is respond to a series of questions, and our software will automatically generate a response on your behalf. This response will also include a section for you to respond to all the claims and a section for your affirmative defenses. So it's a great way to get started with your answer. Step number 2, start negotiating a debt settlement offer. So there are a lot of different ways that you can negotiate a settlement offer, and we're going to go over a few methods. Number 1, you can use the affirmative bargaining method. This is basically where you come up with a clear plan to start with a low offer and meet the debt collector or creditor somewhere in the middle. There are 6 steps generally involved with the affirmative bargaining method. First, you should determine your target settlement amount. Now, this should be an amount that you know you can offer in a lump sum payment. That means you pay it off once and generally pretty close to the date of settlement. Second, you need to make your first offer, and that's going to be about 65% of your target amount. For example, you owe $200 in debt, and your target amount is to pay off $100, or half of the debt. Well, your first offer is going to be 65% of your target amount. So you're going to offer to pay $65. You're probably going to receive a counter offer from your debt collector or creditor. When they come at you with a counter offer, it's probably going to be higher than your target amount. That's okay. The next step of the Ackerman approach is to use empathetic no's to try to show them that you really are at your limit. How am I supposed to accept that? It's really embarrassing, but I just don't think that I can do it. I want to, and I understand that you want to be paid in full, but it's just not in my budget. Fourth, you're going to up your offer to 85%. So you started off with 65%. Next, you're going to up your offer a little bit to 85%. If they don't accept that, bump it up a little bit more to 95%. And if they don't accept that, go all the way to 100% of your target amount. Every offer that you give, you should use non-round numbers. This means instead of offering $65 flat for 65% of the target amount, you're going to offer $65.72. This demonstrates that you have gone back and looked at your finances, considered your budget, and you are actually thinking of a perfect amount that you can fit into your budget. And finally, when you're ready to make your last and final offer, throw in something non-monetary. You could tell them, well, I'll bake you a plate of cookies to show them that you really are at your limit monetarily. Check out the link in our bio below to learn more about the Ackerman approach and how it can help you settle a debt. Another debt settlement approach that you can use is a less structured approach than the Ackerman one. And it is where you determine how much you will offer based off of two factors. Number one, how much can you pay? And number two, how much do you think the collector will accept? You should take a close look at your finances and imagine how much you can offer after all of the basics are taken out. Food, shelter, utilities, transportation, etc. Subtract all your other costs that must be paid with other delinquent debts and the difference to any savings you have available to pay off the debt. The sum is the amount that you have available to pay off the debt. So in other words, take a look at this calculation. The amount that you have available to settle equals your monthly income minus your monthly costs, plus any savings that you have left over. This might be a good way to figure out how much you can afford to settle. Next, you're going to determine how much the collector might accept. This one's a little bit tricky because we see that debts settle within a broad range of amounts. They can settle from anywhere from 1 to over 100%, depending on if there's interest involved. But more frequently, we see them settle for about 10 to 80% of the original debt amount. The American Fair Credit Council has reported that on average, debtors can settle their debts for about 50% of the original amount when working with the debt settlement agency. Now, in practice, we don't really see people getting 50% super often. In our experience, collectors are usually pretty quick to drop down to 80%, but they might not budge and go lower than that. That being said, we usually see people reach a negotiation at about 60% of the debt. Sometimes the total amount of the debt might be a moving target, unfortunately. When you get sued for debt, it's usually for the debt amount plus attorney's fees or interest. Most people find it's easiest to consider the total amount of debt to be the amount that they are being sued for. But sometimes attorneys are going to try to get you to negotiate from an even higher total amount. They might add on post-judgment interest and additional fees. Based on this higher amount, they might even claim that settling for the amount that you're being sued for itself is a reduction, but this just isn't true, and you shouldn't accept it. After all is said and done, 60 to 80% settlement is much more common to reach. Ultimately, you should consider the following factors though when you're trying to figure out how much a debt collector might accept for your settlement offer. Ask yourself, is my debt a signed promissory note or book account? Do I have a meritorious defense to my lawsuit? Is your debt interest bearing? Is there a valid fee shifting provision? A fee shifting provision requires that you, as the borrower, pay the cost of debt collection. When was the last time I made a payment on the debt? Is the debt owed by my original creditor, or has it been assigned to a debt collection agency? Is the debt a part of a federal or state loan program, or is it a private loan? Is it a secured debt? Is it dischargeable in bankruptcy? Student loans are not dischargeable. Are there any offsets? Hint, an offset is when the federal income tax refund that you would have received is used to pay all of or a portion of a debt owing to a federal or state agency. The answers to all of these questions are going to make a huge difference in how much your debt collector might be willing to accept. Once you've determined how much the collector may accept and how much you can afford to pay, pick a number within that range and offer it to the collector. For example, if you determine that you have $3,000 available to pay off a $4,000 debt, and you think the collector will accept maybe 50%, then you can pick a number in the middle and offer it to the collector. So in this case, you might consider offering $2,500. That leaves you some wiggle room to go back and forth with the collector with negotiations. Another method you can use is to pick one price for settlement and stick to it. You're probably going to want to lead with the best offer that you can afford. So with the previous example, if $3,000 is your absolute limit, then start by offering $3,000. If the collector comes back with a counteroffer, don't budge. Just keep repeating your first and only offer of $3,000. We've seen a lot of debt collectors use this tactic, And usually it ends up turning into a game of chicken to see who's going to break first. Another thing to consider here is how you're going to contact your debt collector. There are a lot of ways that you can do so. You can call them, email them, or send them a letter in the mail. We're going to talk about some of the pros and cons of each of these methods. So if you decide to discuss a settlement over the phone, you should definitely consider recording the phone conversation. Many states allow you to record a conversation without getting the other party's consent, so all you need is your own consent. However, there's a handful of states that require all parties to consent to a phone recording. So be aware of your state laws. Here's a graphic that will show you if you need to get the debt collector's consent to be able to record your phone conversation with them. One debt collector also admitted to SoloSuit that they prefer phone negotiations so that they can lie and bully consumers. So even though debt collectors prefer speaking over the phone, it's probably the worst way for you as a consumer to negotiate and try to reach a settlement. You can also consider sending a letter to your debt collector to start the negotiation process. This is better because it provides a recorded paper trail. Most debt collectors are set up to receive mail negotiations, and mail is also asynchronous, which means that you have time between communications to gather yourself and think about your next move. Debt collectors are professional negotiators, but you're probably not, so negotiating by mail levels the playing field and it helps you think between each round. However, one downside to the mailing is that it's slow, and unless you pay for tracked mail, you don't know for sure if your offer is going to be delivered. Next, you can use email. This is kind of like the best of both worlds because it's faster than mail, but it still allows you to keep a record of all your communications, unlike a phone call. Most debt collectors aren't set up to negotiate via email with consumers. However, if you can find the email address of the debt collector on your summons or complaint documents, then it's a really great way to reach out. When you're ready to make a debt settlement offer, you might consider saying something along these lines. Hey, debt collector man, I see you're suing me for $4,000 for the following case number. I don't have that kind of money and I don't agree with the amount, but I do have $2,000 that I can pay within 30 days to settle the debt. Let me know if you accept. SoloSettle is the easiest way to settle a debt. We take care of the negotiation process for you so that you don't have to deal with debt collectors at all. We protect you from their lies and their bullying, and we take care of all the math calculations so that you don't have to hurt your brain thinking about all the different percentages that you may or may not offer. We also help you gather all the right information about the debt collector so that they know that you know what you're talking about. Plus, we use all the proper legal language to help you make sure that your rights are protected. Step 3, get the settlement agreement in writing when they accept an offer. Just like all other communications with debt collectors and their attorneys, you should get your debt settlement agreement in writing. This prevents any sneaky debt collection behavior in the future, and it protects you in case they decide to go back on their word and take you to court again. Now you might be wondering, what does a debt settlement agreement look like? Well, here's an example. A debt settlement agreement will usually contain all of the terms and conditions of paying off the debt. This includes how much you're going to pay, the deadline by which you have to pay it, and other important information. Luckily for you, SoloSettle takes care of the debt settlement documentation for you. We get the debt collector or creditor to get it in writing, and then all you have to do is take care of signing it. Once the debt settlement has been signed by both parties, SoloSuit will send your payment for you. You should be concerned about sharing your sensitive financial information with debt collectors. Bank account numbers, ACH transfers, checks, etc. None of these are going to be safe with debt collectors. So SoloSettle takes care of the payment for you and protects your details. Now I want to go over an example of a real SoloSettle customer who used these 3 steps to protect himself in court and settle his debt for good. When Dan fell behind on his credit card payments with Credit One Bank during COVID, he ended up owing them $1,655.47. Midland Credit Management, a debt collection agency, purchased the debt from Credit One Bank. And after several negative encounters with the collection agency, Dan found out that they were suing him for the debt. Dan used SoloSuit to respond to the lawsuit with a written answer. Then he used SoloSettle to start the negotiation process with Midland Credit Management. SoloSettle helped Dan reach out to the attorneys representing Midland. Dan began with an offer of about $300. The first offer was purposefully low so that Dan had room to accept a higher amount when the lawyer responded with a counteroffer. After a few rounds of negotiations, Dan reached a settlement of $1,100. In the end, Dan's case was dismissed with prejudice, which means Midland Credit Management can never take him to court over the same debt again. All Dan had to do was keep his end of the agreement and pay off the $1,100. Dan paid SoloSettle the debt settlement amount, and SoloSettle transferred his payment over to Midland Credit Management so that his personal financial information was kept private and secure. So in the end, Dan saved $555.47, got his case dismissed, and gave himself a financial reset. Here's what Dan had to say about it in his own words. "I'm very thankful for SoloSettle's help. Having a third party negotiate the settlement was instrumental in resolving this case and saved me from two giant headaches. One, I didn't have to deal with the plaintiff's lawyer, and two, I didn't have to go to court. I also love that the payment was processed through SoloSettle. I was nervous about sharing my personal financial data with the other side, but SoloSettle protected that for me. I hope I never get sued again, but if I do, I would use SoloSettle again in a heartbeat. SoloSettle really saved me a ton of time and heartburn and kept me from having to be my own lawyer in court." Let me share a few features that set SoloSettle apart from traditional debt settlement companies. With SoloSettle, you can settle your debt for less on your own. You don't have to rely on a debt settlement company to do it at their pace and with their terms and conditions. It's all up to you, and you get to stay updated with each step of the process. Additionally, SoloSettle accepts debts of any size. Many debt settlement companies require you to have a debt of at least $15,000 or more to enroll in their program. SoloSettle is also powered by SoloSuit, which is a trusted brand and company that helps people fight and beat debt collectors in court. Since SoloSettle is powered by SoloSuit, it has a legal defense built in. This means that while you're settling, you can use SoloSuit to block lawsuits if you need to. Most debt settlement companies don't provide any legal defense. So if you get sued for a debt, you're on your own. Using SoloSettle is also a great way to protect your financial information from predatory debt collectors. You don't even have to deal with debt collectors directly if you don't want to, because our software negotiates the settlement for you. This saves you from being abused by collectors on the phone. The collectors can only respond with relevant answers that help move the negotiation forward or stop it altogether, so they can either accept it or counteroffer. And finally, SoloSettle helps you manage your debt settlement agreement so that you don't have to worry about all the legalities of it. These are just a few reasons why SoloSettle is your best option for debt settlement. It helps you settle the debt on your own and move on with your life. Well, folks, that's all I have for you today. I hope that you liked this video and that it gave you some guidance on how to settle a debt on your own. If you're interested in checking out SoloSettle, head over to our website at solosuit.com to learn more about the debt settlement process and other resources and services that we can offer to help you resolve a debt. Good luck, and thanks so much for watching.